John Eustace held his pre-match press conference heading into the West Bromwich Albion game, and there was some big announcements coming in the department of injuries, as well as some big talking points in regards to that of the game from Stoke City. Now, obviously, Derby County will be heading to the Hawthorns this evening, and I will be live from around about 7:15 to look through all the latest news, the team sheet, and all of that jazz, and then go through a live watch along with you guys. But in this video, we're going to be taking a look at that pre-match press conference and everything that John Eustace had to say and what we could potentially expect from this upcoming game. Now, the biggest news coming out of it is that Corey Blackett-Taylor and Charles Abuka will be missing for the next 6 weeks, but we will be seeing some rotation this evening with some players getting their first opportunity at minutes in a Derby County shirt. Now, obviously, you can let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. If you're on TikTok, hit like and follow. Let me know your thoughts down below. But should we get into it? Now, John Eustace was obviously asked about the performance at the weekend in regards to that of the 3-1 defeat to Stoke City, but unfortunately, there wasn't really much that he said that changed from post-game on Saturday anyway, and it was very, very true with what he said. We defended very well for large parts of the game. The second half was obviously a lot better. We scored a really, really nice footballing goal, but ultimately we capitulated in the end and gave away 3 points. Now, the 3-1 result for me is a little bit harsh in my opinion. The third goal came because we were trying to get the equaliser. The second goal was a bit of a defensive error, and John Eustace was asked if this was a little bit uncharacteristic of what he'd done with Derby County as manager so far, and he did agree that the current circumstance was definitely uncharacteristic in comparison to that of last season, because if you go back to last season, I think once John Eustace come in, we hadn't lost a game in which we scored first, which is obviously one of those things, but obviously don't start as you mean to go on is what we've done this season. Now, he did sort of discuss that heading into this upcoming game, there was a lot to learn from Saturday in terms of both defensively and attacking. And I think if any of you have sort of looked at the numbers, the data behind the game, you'd know that as much as Derby County were bad, it's quite obvious where the problems were, and it all came from that sort of style of not trying to keep the ball, essentially, and that's sitting in, being rugged, being defensively sharp, and that was where Derby County's problem was. There's been a lot of people digging out Kenzo Heldmine for his performance, but he made 5 out of 14 passes. 4 of them were into the final third. Now, that's exactly what you want from Kenzo. You want him to be making those risky passes. You want him to be putting the ball into the final third, because that's how you create chances. Now, you can look at an Ebo Adams, you can look at a Liam Thompson, who maybe played a little bit safer passes, and their obviously pass accuracy was a little bit higher, but ultimately, for me, that is where the learning comes from. It's trying to find a circumstance in which Derby County can keep the ball and get their best players on it to create those chances. We had that really good opportunity with Corey Blackett-Taylor in which Carlton Morris scored from, and that was, I think, only one of maybe 2 or 3 runs he did throughout the game. Now, obviously, the disappointment of his injury, which we'll get onto in a moment, but I do think there's a lot that we can take from that game despite the result. Now, John Eustace was keen to point out that obviously a lot of players are lacking minutes, and that's obviously sort of what one of the aims will be for obviously this game. We obviously saw Vyman, Ozo, Sanderson all come into the team within the second half, and some played better than others, as you will well know, but it's one of those things where as the players pick up minutes, we'll be in a much better position. Now, he was sort of asked about obviously the learnings and whether it was sort of better to lose now than later down the line, to which he basically said that it's obviously never good to lose, but it is important that you grow throughout the season, and this defeat gives Derby County that opportunity where they can grow and grow and grow as the season goes on, because it can't get much worse, in complete honesty. Now, he does go on to discuss how a lot of players will be returning over the next few weeks. You look at the likes of Kane Wilson, Langas, Selverson, Beck, Agimang, Brewster, Clark, and obviously Matt Clark's already returned. They should all be back over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, which will obviously be really good for Derby, and that will continue with that improvement, and it will continue with that growth as well as Derby County move in a different direction. Now, he was asked about the challenge of Derby and whether he felt that it was more difficult than those that he'd have previously, the likes of Blackburn, the likes of Birmingham City. And he said that it's a massive rebuild, but it's a very, very exciting challenge. And obviously he wants to improve over the next few years. He's not looking at right now, he's looking at the next few years. And he says that it's important that we don't get too high on the highs, we don't get too low on the lows, and it's a just consistent line of growth going throughout the seasons. And I completely agree with him, and I think we're certainly on a very, very good trajectory for Derby County to become obviously a much better side, but we're going to have to wait and see how that shakes out when the new signings do finally get themselves into the squad and things like that. Now, John Eustace was keen to point out that if you look at Stoke's squad, they've had a very consistent squad over the course of the last few years, and don't get me wrong, they have brought players in, of course they have. They've obviously got a new manager which joined, I think it was back in January, but it's one of those where they've had sort of like a consistent squad, a consistent basis of we've got these players available. Whereas for Derby County, as much as we have that same 11 pretty much from last year, we've also had a lot of changes. There's no Armstrong now, there's no Marcus Harness, no Jerry Yates, no Mendes Lang. So there's all those changes that have happened behind the scenes with the squad, and we're still sort of gelling together. But obviously it's important that we don't look too much into it. Now, he spoke about Carlton Morris and his clinical nature and how he was great with and without the ball, and he was a great leader for the game, and that's exactly what was expected from John Eustace when he brought in Carlton Morris. But we're going to have to wait and see how that sort of shakes out over the course of obviously the rest of the season. He's got 1 goal already. How many more can he get this season? I'm expecting about 15. And John Eustace was keen to point out that Carlton Morris is one of those players that those younger talents, your Dejan Browns, your Corey Blackett-Taylors, well, not necessarily Corey Blackett-Taylor, but like Charles Abuka, Lennon Wilden, those sort of younger players can sort of look up to him and grow off him essentially, and that's obviously really important for the future. He was asked about David Ozo, who John Eustace went on to say that he's a great player, very athletic, very aggressive, but he still has a lot to learn, and he has sort of protection in mind when it comes to David Ozo, because he doesn't want to push him too hard too quickly and end up in the same situation that we was in last year. But he will hold a big role in the team once he is 100% confident. But obviously, we've got to keep looking sort of long term, not short term, and that includes this season. We're 1 game down of 46. There's a long, long way to go in this season. And even if David Ozo starts 25 games, he can have a huge impact. And the important thing that John Eustace is asking for from his team is to be competitive and to get on the ball and be brave and cause problems. And I feel like at the weekend we didn't really do that, but I think that's more down to the players involved than sort of anything else. Liam Thompson and Ibu Adams aren't really your technical players. They're workhorses, they're tacklers, and obviously there's a lot of development to go with that, but they've got to be better, they've got to be more competitive, they've got to get on the ball, they've got to cause problems. And that's obviously sort of what John Eustace is going to look to improve when we go into the transfer market. And that was sort of the next question, where he was asked what areas he's sort of looking to improve, and sort of the aim of the question from Dom Dietrich was sort of, I think it was to try and pick out sort of like a specific area, but John Eustace was keen on sort of saying, we're looking to improve everywhere. We aren't the finished article. We've got a lot of work to do, and that will come with improvement, with players returning from injury. And we've obviously got a long way to go until that fully happens. Now, onto sort of Derby County's next sort of moves. There's obviously wingers that Derby County want to bring in, but it has to be the right one. We can't just bring someone in for the sake of it. And that's important, that everybody knows that the staff behind the scenes are working really, really hard on recruitment and making sure we get the right players. And it's important that this season, despite the fact that we've brought in a range of good players, that we don't get too carried away. It's important to keep that consistency building across the season. And obviously, with the quick turnaround, it's really important for the players who need to get minutes to build their fitness levels. And that is why we're going to see a ton of rotation heading into tonight's game. And the aim is to compete and to obviously win the game. Now, obviously, onto some changes that could happen tonight. It was discussed in the post-match up against Stoke City that Bobby Clark would be getting his first minutes versus West Bromwich Albion. Will it be a start? Will it be off the bench? We're not entirely sure. John Eustace described him as a technically great player who had a great move to Salzburg but ultimately didn't work, and the aim now is for him to get his head down, to perform and rebuild his confidence. And John Eustace said that he can play anywhere in the three. I'm assuming he means the three behind the striker and the midfield three, so we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But obviously the newest and latest adductions to Derby County's injury list is Corey Blackett-Taylor and Charles Abuka. Corey Blackett-Taylor has a strain on his hamstring. He's going to be out for 6 weeks. And Charles Abuka has a groin injury, which is keeping him out for 6 weeks as well. We don't have any update on Ryan Brewster, but he has been pictured in training, so he may be involved later on today. You've also got Patrick Agyemang, who is still about a month or so away. The same with the likes of Wilson, Langas, Selverson and Nelson. We also haven't heard a word about Owen Beck, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens with that one. But you can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. We will be live over on YouTube at around 7:15 later on today to go through the team sheets and everything like that, and obviously a live watch along versus West Brom. But you can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you have not done so already, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button and turn on that notification bell, and I'll catch you later on.